All right, first you want to make sure you have the necessary tools. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. You'll need a rekey kit with pins probably 0 through 9. You'll need a follower, which should come with your rekey kit. You're going to need the original key and the key that came with the Lockly lock. So you're going to need 2 keys, and that's pretty much it. You can also have this like little tool to help you remove the cap off of the back of the cylinder. It's not necessary. You can actually just use something pointed to get the cap off to push in the pin, but this little tool definitely makes it a lot easier. And you also might need a key gauge if your current key doesn't have the numbers directly written on the key. That way you can measure what pins you need to put in there directly right off the key. It's really easy to use. And by the way, this is a Schlage-like 5-pin cylinder, so you're going to have a 5-pin key. All my locks in my house happen to be 5-pin Schlage-like locks or keys, so that's going to work for me. But if you have other cylinders or a 6-pin cylinder, you're just going to have to figure out another solution. It probably is not going to work just because of the different size and things just don't work. But for a standard 5-pin Schlage-like key and cylinder, this should work. Which, by the way, you're not replacing the cylinder here, so you're just rekeying new pins into the cylinder, so it should work as long as it's a 5-pin Schlage-like key that you're using. Now, first thing you need to do is get the bracket off the back. There's 3 little screws, and there's actually 2 brackets that are kind of just sistered together. Just know the order and positioning of them, just so you'll be able to know how to put them back on later. Next, you want to take off the weather strip. It's probably the hardest thing here, simply because there's so much glue, and you're probably voiding your warranty here. Just FYI, I'm not sure if you actually are or not, but there's so much glue here. You're probably, you do want to be careful not to rip it. You do want that weather seal on, and when you put it back on, it's not going to be the same. So I want to go slow here and make sure you're actually peeling off that weather strip and the glue itself. As you can see here, as I got to the top, part of the glue actually stuck onto the lock itself, and it just was not even afterwards. And I kind of had to manipulate the glue part, or the adhesive part after the fact, just so it would not stick out of the corners once I put the lock back on. So it does take a little bit of strength and a little finesse to get that weather strip off. That's probably the hardest part here. And once you do that, you have 13 screws you have to remove. And unfortunately, you have to remove them all. And then once you do, just go ahead and take off that back cover. Don't pull it off too hard because there are some wires attached. You don't have to disconnect any of the wires, but you do want to be careful. And then the cylinder itself and this bracket, you do have some glue inside that bracket, and you have a weather strip also underneath of it. So that also is going to take some strength and some finessing to get that out of there. And once you get the bracket off with the cylinder, there's even more glue attached to the cylinder, attached to the bracket, and you just have to kind of push it out, and it's a very tight fit. I did find that a standard, or what I call standard, Schlage cylinder from an actual Schlage 5-pin lock also fit in this. I don't know if that's actually standard, but just FYI, this is using a 5-pin key, Schlage key, so just keep that in mind. I'm not sure if you can read key or re-cylinder this. I've seen a bunch of different cylinder sizes and still being the same key, so just keep the same cylinder and just put new pins in here, which is the next step once you get that cylinder out of that big bracket. Now at this point, go ahead and install the Lockly key into the cylinder. It's going to make it a lot easier to hold on to. And if you have that little tool I was talking about earlier to remove the back cap, you can use that tool right now. You just want to push in the pin and give that cap a turn. If you don't have this tool, you just have to use a pin or Phillips head screwdriver, push in that back pin, and then start turning. That pin's probably going to come up a few times, and you're just going to have to keep on doing it until that back cap comes off, screws off. And once you unscrew the end cap, the whole tail will come off with it. Be careful, the pin that you were pushing down has a spring underneath. You want to take that pin out and probably the spring also, so you don't lose it. If you drop it on the floor and the carpet, it's just going to be a bad day for you. So make sure you put that on the side and you can reinstall that later. And now here's where you need the follower. This is extremely important. If you don't use a follower and you pull off, I don't know what that piece is called, like that bar that's on top of where the pins are, there's other pins inside that will pop out with little springs. The purpose of this follower is to keep those pins and springs inside that little sleeve. If you don't do that, they're all going to pop out and you're not going to have a fun day. So put the follower on the back and then push off that sleeve right onto it. And that way you get access to the lower pins. Go ahead, pop out all those lower pins. Use your key from your original Schlage lock, or if you have to measure it, use the little key gauge to measure your current key and put in the pin numbers in order. And if you did it right, you can actually switch out the Lockly key for your current key, and those pins should line up nice and straight, and none of them should stick down, none of them should stick up. It should be completely flat on the cylinder if you did it correctly. And now go ahead and take your follower and push the body back on to the cylinder. Hopefully that goes well for you. Just make sure it's all next to each other and nice and even, and you shouldn't have any issues. And once it's back on, you'll be able to put the tail and the cap back on. You can use the tool if you have it, otherwise you're gonna have to use a screwdriver or a pin to push that pin back in, and then everything else is just in reverse. You want to first take the cylinder, put it back into the housing. It does take a little strength. Don't forget that little weather seal. I did find it was easier to put the weather seal into the actual lock first and then install that cylinder and housing on top of the weather strip. And then you'll want to close everything up and make sure none of the wires are pinched anywhere. Go ahead and install your 13 screws, just way too many, and then you're going to have fun installing that weather strip. And like I mentioned earlier, I did have an issue with the weather strip not lining up properly just because I uninstalled it incorrectly. But you know, if you go slow and make sure the actual adhesive comes off with the weather strip, you should be fine. But I did have to kind of like tuck some of the adhesive in just so it wouldn't stick out at the end of the day. Obviously it's never going to be the same as it came out of the factory, so keep that in mind. And then go ahead and reinstall those two remaining brackets. Make sure they go in the right position, and also the wire harness wire goes into the right place. It has a very specific place it needs to go into. There's a hole for it, so just make sure it goes into the right place. Otherwise you won't be able to get the screws in, and at worst case you won't even get the lock on just because that wire is in the wrong place. So just make sure you keep an eye on where it's supposed to go. All in all, this rekey is not that difficult, but I would say it's a little bit harder than most locks just because there's so many screws and adhesives. They should have made this a little bit easier to rekey, especially since they're marketing this as a lock that you can rekey. But at the end of the day, it's really not that bad. All right guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope this video was helpful. Make sure you hit that like button if it was, and if you guys want to see more reviews and how-tos, definitely hit that subscribe button. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or just want to get some clarification on any of this rekeying, definitely let me know down below. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next one.